What's up, guys? Welcome to another playoff series prediction video, and we're going to be talking about two Western teams this time, the Winnipeg Jets and the Colorado Avalanche. So this is the first time these two teams face each other in the playoffs, so it's going to be a fresh matchup to talk about, but two teams that have been very solid all around, all season long, and one team that surprised everybody this season in terms of how good they were, and that was the Winnipeg Jets. And in terms of the Colorado Avalanche, a team that's won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago, they fell short of expectations last year, and they got eliminated by the Seattle Kraken, the newest team in the NHL. So this year, they're coming back with, motivation essentially to prove people that it was just not a one-time thing, that they could actually be contenders and go all the way again like they did 2 years ago. And their team has drastically changed in terms of forwards and even some of the defensemen. Like, you look at the team that won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago, and it's far from the same team on paper in terms of their goaltending and their forwards. But the Winnipeg Jets have made some changes too during the offseason. They didn't go far in the playoffs last year, but they did, put up a good fight in the first round, and they got eliminated. So both teams, first round exits last year. One of them will come up on top and be victorious and move on to the second round. Who will it be? Well, we're going to be discussing that in today's video. So, Luca, take it away.
Yeah, so obviously the first ever matchup between these two teams. So it's always nice when you do a playoff series, especially when you're watching the playoffs, to see two new teams play each other, because it kind of makes this predictions video even harder to predict, in the sense that you don't actually know, let's say, the history between these two teams apart from regular season matchups. And we all know that that doesn't always matter when it comes to the playoffs. One thing I will say, though, about the Winnipeg Jets this season is they showed everybody what I think a lot of people expected, which is they were a better team than I think previously anticipated. And what I mean by that is, this is a team that is well coached, right? Rick Bowness coaches this team, in a very good way. We all know how good of a coach Rick Bowness is. But not only that, it's a team that finally, I think, played to their true potential. And I know that they're not necessarily the most elite team in terms of, let's say, the players they have, but Connor Hellebuyck this year was the biggest reason, I think, why the Winnipeg Jets are in this position. And in fact, I'm going to go on and just say their goaltending is the biggest reason as to why they are where they are. You look at Connor Hellebuyck, 60 games played this year, 37 wins, 19 losses, 4 overtime losses, and 5 shutouts, 921 save percentage, and 239 goals against average. That is absolutely spectacular. But they also got goaltending from their backup, Laurent Brossoit, who won a cup with Vegas last year, in 14 wins, 5 losses, 2 overtime losses, 928 save percentage, and 3 shutouts. So the Jets have been able to get elite level goaltending all season. 923 is the league is the total for them between the two goaltenders. So they've been absolutely fantastic. And if you look at their team, they're first in the NHL in goals against, which is absolutely fantastic. It means that they've been able to play very good hockey. It means that they've gotten good defensemen, and they've played very well defensively. And it means that their goaltending has kept them in games and have been able to steal one. The thing with the Winnipeg Jets, and I think this is where things have I think, maybe been looked at a little bit differently, is their offensive core, right? If you look at their offensive core, Mark Scheifele, 74 games, missed a little bit of time, 72 points, decent season for him. Josh Morrissey, kind of continued from last year, 69 points in 81 games. He was good. Kyle Connor was a good player, 61 points in 65 games. I think if they had him healthy for a full season, maybe he gets better production. But the thing with the Jets is they haven't had a lot of guys that have played a lot of games, like a full 82-game season. So that's kind of played a big role for them. But when they have had guys healthy, they've played well, right? So I think the Jets look good, and I think that they've had a very good season. Moving on to the Colorado Avalanche very quickly, this is a team that we know they can score. I mean, Nathan MacKinnon, 138 points, 51 goals, 87 assists. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Mikko Rantanen, 41, 62, 103, and then Cale Makar with 89. Jonathan Drouin and Valerie Nichushkin have had very good seasons as well. Devon Tays has had a very good season as well. But with Colorado, the question becomes in net. And I think we've had this conversation with Colorado for a long time is, they don't necessarily always have the best goaltending. But one thing I'm concerned about with Colorado, Georgiev. I'm just not sure about Georgiev. And I know he's got 38 wins this season. I know he was an NHL All-Star, but an .897 save percentage. He's struggled in his last 10 games. He hasn't looked good. And, to some extent, you can look and say maybe they start Justus Annunen game 1 of the playoffs. I'd be very surprised if they did. And the reason I'm saying that is not because I don't think Justus Annunen is a good goalie, but I think you're throwing in a guy who hasn't really played in the playoffs much and hasn't really played many NHL games this season to really throw him into the wolves. So I don't know what their goaltending is going to look like. They made some minor acquisitions. They acquired Casey Middlestat in a big trade for Bowen Byram, which has proven to be decent, not great, but decent. 9 points in 17 games for him. They brought in Sean Walker, that I think has been a big part of their team defensively. I think he's going to help them out, and I think he's proven that he's capable. Brandon Duhaim's been a decent depth player for them. Yakov Trenin as well, 2 goals in 15 games. But this is a team that is going to be able to score their problems away. But what's interesting about these two matchups is you've got the best defensive team in the league playing one of the best offensive teams in the league. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work. Is it going to be a question of is Winnipeg's defense and goaltending going to hold up, or is Colorado just going to score goals in bunches? And that's really the biggest question between these two teams. I'm gonna root here for the Winnipeg Jets. I think because they're a Canadian team and because being from Canada, you always wanting to see the Canadian teams work. But I think one of the biggest reasons why is because I think they're just very well balanced. I think Tyler Toffoli is a big pickup for them that they got at the trade deadline. I think Sean Monahan's been a big revelation for them. 24 points in 33 games. They have Kyle Connor back healthy. Mark Scheifele's playing healthy. And they have Connor Hellebuck playing as a Vezina caliber goaltender. So I think the sky's the limit for the Jets, in my opinion. And I do think that they're going to put up a fight against Colorado. But ultimately, just looking at this team on paper and looking at this matchup, I think the Jets are going to pull it off. That's my personal opinion. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to do it in 6 games. I think the reason why is because I think Colorado's goaltending is going to let them down. That's the only reason why I think the Jets are going to win.
It's funny that you mentioned 6 games because, right before, I was just thinking about my thoughts while you were talking. I'm like, how many games do you think this is going to last, Chris? And for some reason, the first number that popped up in my head was 6.
Yeah.
And for the same reason, goaltending. And if you just look at Connor Hellebuck this year, okay, a .921 save percentage in terms of goals against average, 2.39. Okay.
Yeah.
Apart from Hellebuck, Sergei Bobrovsky is probably the best goalie this season in terms of the regular season. Right. Okay. Right. So those two are going to be duking it out for the Vezina Trophy this year. And if you look at Grubauer, sorry, not Grubauer. That was their old goalie. Georgiev. Falling short of 900 in terms of save percentage. As a starting goaltender, that is a big issue heading into the playoffs. And we know that, yes, they have 200-point players on this team. They have experience with Zach Parise, who will retire at the end of this playoffs, whether if they win the cup or they don't. They added a boatload of depth forwards at the deadline in terms of Yakov Trenin, Brandon Duhaime, like you mentioned before. Arturi Lekin has been a fantastic add. He's going to be an X factor in terms of their depth. He was there for their Stanley Cup win. Nichushkin as well. They add Middlestat into the mix. Drouin has been fantastic on this team with McKinnon, and he's been proven to be a top 5 player this season. So they obviously, in terms of the forwards, we know that they win in that regard. In terms of the defense, yes, they have the more offensively minded players in Cale Makar and Samuel Girard and Devon Taves, but they're pretty good defensively as well. But when you look at the Winnipeg Jets, they scream pure defense. And the only guy that I would say that really threads a needle offensively is Josh Morrissey in terms of the defensive players. So when you're looking at it in those regards, that's how I evaluate it. In terms of goaltending, hands down Hellebuck over Gorgiev. And even if Hellebuck goes down or he's not playing on par, they still have Laurent Brossoit, who's better than Gorgiev as well in terms of his save percentage. And he's won a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights last year. So he has experience as well. Gorgiev, his time with the New York Rangers was disappointing. People were saying he needed more games. He goes to Colorado. He's done well for what was given to him, but at the same time, look at the team he's playing with, and look at the players in front of him. You put him on another team, he's going to be one of the worst goaltenders, and people are going to be talking about him a lot more. And because he's playing with the Colorado Avalanche, he gets a pass. Not a lot of people are mentioning him. Only the purists, the people that actually look into analytics and watch Gorgiev's game, will say that he's one of the weakest starting goaltenders in the league.
Oh yeah, he's struggled. But I think what's interesting too about Georgiev is it feels like we've seen this coming. Like we always talked about Colorado, and one of the biggest things that I was worried about with Colorado was like this team's stacked, right? Like they're fantastic in every aspect of their team, but they still haven't been able to get consistent goaltending. And what's one thing I want to talk about in terms of the Jets? The Jets are coming off 7 straight wins. They've won 7 straight games going into the playoffs. So they're coming into the playoffs red hot, right? And that's, I think, a big story that I think we need to talk about with the Winnipeg Jets is this is a team that's rolling right now. And when a team is rolling and when they get hot in the playoffs, I feel like sometimes that actually makes a huge factor because it shows that, when it matters most and when it counts most, they're willing to show up and actually be, difference makers. And if you look at Colorado's last 10 games, they're 3-5-2. That's not good at all, right? Like that's really, really bad. You look at their goals against average, you look at their goals forward to goals against. Colorado's got 399 goals forward, but they have 253 goals against, right? So this is a team that as much as they can score, they can't really keep the puck out of the net either. But one thing that Colorado does have over the Jets is their special teams. If you look at Colorado's power play percentage, it's one of the best in the league, 24.45% on the power play, which is absolutely fantastic. And on their PK, they're above league average with 80.15, whereas the Jets, right, only on their power play, they only have a 19.07% power play percentage, which is below league average. And their PK percentage is at 77.27%, which is lower than their league average currently. That's going to be a problem. And I think the reason that could be also a big factor in this series, right? Colorado's got a very good special teams. They're good on the PK, they're good on the power play. The Jets haven't necessarily been at their best on the power play in their PK, but they've been good on 5-on-5. I think that's going to be a big, interesting situation for them is can the Jets find a way to beat Colorado in the special teams battle? If they can, I think they're going to win this series. But I think at some point, yes, you got to rely on your goaltending, but, when you get those power play opportunities, when you get those opportunities to kill penalties, you have to be able to kill those penalties. You have to be able to score those power play goals because those make the difference at the end of the day, right? Yes, 5-on-5 is important, and you obviously need to be good 5-on-5, but you also need to take your chances when they come. And I feel like with the Winnipeg Jets this season, yes, to some extent, I think people can argue and say, oh, they've kind of overachieved at times this season, but I just think they're very well coached. Right. And I think they've been coached in a very good way. I think they've played a very good defensive style that's allowed them to also generate some offense. And I think they have some players that, I think have come in and really been difference makers as well. So I do think, the Jets do have what it is to beat Colorado. Obviously, Colorado's tough to predict in the sense that, their team is fantastic in every sense of the word. The only issue with me is, this is a team that's going to have to score 6 goals in order to win. And I think in the playoffs, when it's tight-knit hockey and when you're playing, teams that are a little bit more cautious defensively, I think that's going to be a problem because I don't think you're going to score 6 goals every single game, right? And I do think that if your goaltending isn't going to be living up to par, you're going to have trouble being able to win games. So my biggest concern is that, and I feel like I know, Colorado's got a good team, and I don't want to talk bad about Colorado. They've won a cup. We know that they're cup contenders, and they've got a great team on paper. If I have to look at the goaltending battle, and for me, I think in the playoffs, that's the biggest difference is goaltending. I look at the goaltending battle, and I think to myself, I'm taking Connor Hellebuck every day of the week, and I would even argue that I would take Laurent Brossoit over Georgiev right now in a playoff
Yeah,
series.
that's exactly what I
So
was saying.
I do think right. I think that's going to be the difference. I think Connor Hellebuck, if he plays the way he's played all season, I just don't see how Colorado wins this series. I'm
And
sorry,
just
Avs
taking a
fans.
look at their team as well in terms of the Winnipeg Jets, like they add Nino Niederreiter and Nemestikov at last year's deadline,
Yeah,
which they've been fantastic fits ever since. You add
yeah,
Sean Monahan and Tyler Toffoli at this year's deadline. They've
yeah,
been fantastic fits. Like whenever they add players, these are not guys that are just like short-term solutions. These are looking like longer term solutions. And yes, Monahan and Toffoli will be UFAs, but I wouldn't be surprised if both of them do resign after the season, um, or if they'll be signing at least one of them because
yeah,
both of them have been fantastic and more Sean Monahan than Tyler Toffoli because Sean Monahan has played a lot longer with them since he got traded earlier and
yeah,
he's been a fantastic fit and the fans love both of them. Tyler Toffoli is a 30 goal scorer, so maybe he's going to be asking for a lot more money. So I see him hitting the market um, in terms of demanding a higher demanding a higher salary in terms of contract. Um, but Sean Monahan, I wouldn't be surprised if they re-sign him. He's been a fantastic fit, and I think he'll be demanding less in terms of money. But I like what they have in this terms of this team. That you know, another thing I would like to mention is that Pierre-Luc Dubois, that trade
yeah,
helped the Winnipeg Jets solidify their four lines. Gabriel
yeah,
Velarde's playing in a top line role. Alex I follow is somebody that's interchangeable on any line, even though he's playing on the fourth line right now. He's played first line minutes. He's been put on the power play. He's played second line minutes, third line minutes, and that's what I like about the Winnipeg Jets. They have um, a lot of options. They're versatile in terms of that. They have a lot of Swiss Army knives, and in terms of the Colorado Avalanche, it's like, well, you're looking at their bottom six. I don't think any of these guys could play in the top six, unfortunately. I think they're just relegated to bottom
yeah.
six roles. But with the Winnipeg Jets, if things are not going well after one game and they lose their first game, they could make some changes. They could put Niederreiter on the first line if they want to, or to Tyler Toffoli. They could do that, and I think that's what makes them even stronger because there's other
Yeah.
options. For me, I would have to say it's just them not being as versatile in terms of their defensemen compared to the Colorado Avalanche. They're more defensively minded and they rely more on Morrissey. But at the end of the day, our ex co-host used to always say that defense wins championships, and in this point in time, I believe that's what we're looking at. Colorado do not have as much of a complete team compared to the Winnipeg Jets. And if you're really relying on your top six forwards to get the job done, if those guys are shut down, well, can the likes of Miles Wood, Ross Carlton, an old Zach Parise, Trennan, Duhaime, and Colliano get it done compared to the likes of what Winnipeg has at the bottom six? I don't think so.
I
So
think
yeah.
I think I would argue that I do think Colorado is a complete team. I think their D core is one of the best in the league, just on paper. I think for me, the issue with Colorado, and I'm gonna say this, and maybe people might disagree with me on this, but I think when you add too many guys at the deadline, it takes a toll. And the reason I'm saying that is because you look at their bottom six, right? Like Yakov Trenin, Brandon Duhaime, right? These are two guys they brought in, right? Casey Middlestad, who's on the top six, Zach Parise, who they brought in. You look at their defense, they brought in Sean Walker. They've added a lot of new pieces. And to me, I feel like when a team adds a lot of assets, right, you have to build chemistry. And I just feel like apart from Casey Middlestad and maybe to some extent Sean Walker, the other guys haven't really developed immense chemistry together. And sometimes when you add too many guys, like it's like a video game. When you trade for every single best player and then you don't win the Stanley Cup or you don't win the game, you're like, oh shit. It's because you can't build a super team, right? At some point, you need to have a balance. And I don't know with Colorado if they always have that balance. I don't know if they always have, let's say, the correct, let's say, players to win a cup. I mean, look, at the end of the day, Nathan McKinnon can win you a cup by himself. Let's be honest. He's done it before. He's probably going to do it again. But it goes back to the situation of I just think with Colorado this year, there's been a lot more flaws in their game compared to previous years. I think they've been exposed at times this season, and I think they've been shown that look, they're maybe not as good as people might think they are. And I think a lot of that has to do with them not being able to keep the puck out of the net. And I do think that that's going to take a toll on them in terms of their playoffs. I think no matter how you look at the Jets, and even if the Jets don't have the prettiest decor in the league, well, they've been able to keep the puck out of the net, and that's been, I think, the biggest story for them all season is, that's where it comes to. So when we say, oh, the Jets are more balanced defensively, it's not a disrespect to Colorado. It's more of a praise to the Winnipeg Jets in the sense that they've been able to play some fantastic hockey all season, and they've been able to be shut down defensively as well, to where they don't. I think they went on a run. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they went on a run of like 35 or 36 games where they allowed 2 goals or less. Like that's fucking impressive. Like that's how tough that is to do in this league, and the fact that they were able to do that and win or lose games and only let in 2 goals, like that's fantastic. So I think that in itself shows you just how good the Jets have been this season.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I think a lot of people have been writing off the Jets because like, oh, they're playing Colorado, they're gonna get their ass kicked. But I'm like, I don't know. Like I think the Jets can win 4 games here, and I do think they're gonna do it. I think they're gonna win 6.
There's a couple of points I'd like to make before we end off this episode. Like you mentioned, this team, despite having the odds against them, very few people thought that the Winnipeg Jets were going to be as good as they were this year. People even had them missing the playoffs. They even had their coach take a leave of absence, and they were still winning games during that time, and they were still playing fantastic hockey. So they've had everything against them. So they just said, you know what, we're going to go out there, do our best, and prove people wrong. In terms of the additions that you were mentioning before and that I mentioned before, just to sum that up, they didn't add as much as Colorado, but they added 2 pieces that fit well, but also are quality players, as opposed to the Colorado Avalanche. They just chose players based off quality and just trying to make hockey moves. In terms of the Casey Middlestat for Bowen Byram, that was a hockey move. I thought that was great. But in terms of Brandon Duhaime, was that really necessary when you have a guy like Logan Connor playing bottom 6 minutes? I don't really think so. Zach Parise, you're giving him a chance. I understand that. Is he the player that he was with the Islanders last year and the year before that? Not even. So you're not even getting, the twilight years of Parise where he was actually still putting up decent numbers. He's a shell of himself, and I think it shows, and that's why he's opting out to retire at the end of the season, because I don't think his body can take it. Miles Wood, people are not too crazy about him, and especially with that contract that he signed during the offseason. They add Rose Carlton, who has experience at Tampa. Will he be a factor in the playoffs for Colorado and help them? Like, there's so many what ifs with Colorado, goaltending as well. But with the Winnipeg Jets, is more of a clear path. We know what to expect from them. Like guys like Adam Lowry, who are not the flashiest of names. He's the captain of their team. He was kick-ass last year in the first round. He was a clutch player. And the funniest thing about the Winnipeg Jets is that this is a team that doesn't even have Cole Perfetti in the starting lineup. If Cole Perfetti slots in and does what he's capable of doing and elevates his game, because, sure, he didn't have the best season. He only had 36 points.
Yeah.
People could consider that disappointing. But come playoff time, this kid has what it takes to be really good. And if that's the case, they have even more fuel. They have more depth in that regard. So for me, I have to say Winnipeg Jets in 6 because of the various reasons that we mentioned before. Also, we're Canadian, so I would obviously want to root for a Canadian team as well. But I just, like you said, Colorado has been exposed throughout this whole season. Yeah, they're calling Nathan McKinnon the dog, and Drouin's having a resurgence with the Colorado Avalanche, and Rantanen's great as always, and Nichushkin's been in and out for issues outside of hockey, but still proving to be a consistently good hockey player. But at the end of the day, for all the reasons that we stated, I got to go to Winnipeg.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So
So, guys, we'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below in terms of the Winnipeg Jets versus Colorado Avalanche first round. First time these two teams face off against each other. So, you know, there's a lot of unknown area to you know to eventually delve into in terms of historical, head to head games against each other in playoffs. But just taking a look at the season doesn't really give you an expectation of what to expect in the playoffs all the time. Sometimes it does, but when it comes to playoffs, it's a completely different season, and you start back at zero. Anything is
yeah,
possible. Though even the worst of teams that make the playoffs could go on the deepest runs. So we've seen that multiple times. But guys, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think Colorado wins the series and how many games? Do you think Winnipeg wins the series and how many games? We'd like to hear your thoughts in terms of how you view this matchup in general as well. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next playoff matchup prediction video. And you guys could check out our other videos as well that were posted before this one. But thank you so much, guys, and have a good night.
peace.